Take a moment and imagine this. You step into a time machine and travel back to 17th century France, and when the doors open, you find yourself standing inside the grand ballroom of the Palace of Versailles, one of the most magnificent and powerful symbols of European royalty ever built. Above you, a massive chandelier glows with the light of thousands of candles, casting a warm, almost dreamlike light across the entire room, while beneath your feet stretches a perfectly polished marble floor that reflects everything around you, making the space feel even larger and more surreal. As you look around, you notice the walls lined with gold-framed mirrors that seem to go on forever, multiplying the light, the movement, and the people, while elegant nobles dressed in layers of silk and lace move across the room with controlled, almost rehearsed grace. The women's dresses flow as they walk, the fabric catching the light with every step, and the men stand tall in powdered wigs, their posture rigid, their movements careful, as if every gesture is being observed and judged. Violins play softly in the background, blending with quiet conversations and bursts of laughter, creating a scene that feels almost too perfect, like something carefully staged for a painting or a film. But then slowly, something begins to feel wrong. At first, it's subtle, almost unnoticeable, just a faint discomfort that you can't quite place. But as you breathe in again, it becomes clearer, heavier, more difficult to ignore, until you realize that what you are sensing isn't just part of the environment, but something completely out of place in such a beautiful setting. It's the smell. Not a mild passing odor, but something sharp and overwhelming, something that hits the back of your throat and lingers there, making each breath slightly uncomfortable. It smells like ammonia, like an old, unclean public space that has been neglected for far too long, and mixed into it is something even worse, something rotten, thick, and sour, like spoiled eggs or decaying matter. And then it becomes clear that smell is human waste. Yes, inside one of the most luxurious palaces in history, surrounded by wealth, power, and beauty, there was filth, and not just hidden away in distant corners, but present throughout the space, in hallways, behind curtains, along walls, and sometimes in places where people simply chose convenience over cleanliness. Suddenly the scene in front of you begins to change. The beauty is still there, but it no longer feels the same, because now you understand what lies beneath it. Those elegant, noble women, moving so gracefully across the floor, many of them have not washed their hair in weeks, sometimes even longer. And beneath those elaborate wigs, lice can be found, hidden, but very much present. Those refined gentlemen dressed in fine clothing and standing with such confidence, many of them have not bathed in months, and the strong scent of perfume surrounding them is not simply a matter of luxury or fashion, but a necessity. Something used to mask what could not be removed. And that brings us to a strange and uncomfortable question. Why would people with such wealth, such access to resources, and such influence over society choose to live like this? Why didn't they simply wash? Why didn't they build systems to keep themselves clean? And perhaps even more interestingly, how did this reality, this world filled with dirt, smell, and discomfort, give rise to things that we now associate with elegance and sophistication, such as perfume, high heels, wigs, cloaks, and even certain forms of etiquette? To understand that, we need to go further back in time, to a period when things were very different. In ancient Rome, cleanliness was not just a luxury, but a normal part of daily life. Public baths were everywhere, and they were not reserved for the elite. Ordinary citizens used them regularly, often bathing every day, not only to clean themselves but also to socialize, relax, and participate in daily life. Bathhouses were cultural centers, places where people gathered, talked, and spent time together. And they were supported by advanced infrastructure, including aqueducts that brought fresh water into cities and sewer systems that carried waste away. But after the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476, these systems began to collapse. Cities were damaged by invasions, bathhouses were abandoned, and the complex networks that once managed water and waste were no longer maintained. Over time, they broke down completely, and as the centuries passed, people gradually moved away from the habits and systems that had once kept their environment relatively clean. By the Middle Ages, bathing was no longer common, and as time went on, it became increasingly rare, even among the highest levels of society. Kings, nobles, and wealthy individuals might go through life bathing only a few times, something that seems almost impossible to imagine today, but at the time it was not seen as strange. This shift was not simply due to a lack of resources or knowledge, but was driven by fear, belief, and misunderstanding. In the 14th century, Europe was struck by one of the most devastating events in human history, the Black Death, a pandemic that spread rapidly across the continent and killed millions of people within a few years. Entire communities disappeared, social systems broke down, and for those living through it, it must have felt like the end of the world. The problem was that no one understood what caused the disease. There was no knowledge of bacteria or viruses, no microscopes to observe microorganisms, and no scientific framework to explain how illness spread. In the absence of real answers, people created their own explanations, and one of the most influential ideas that emerged was the belief that disease was carried through bad air, especially air associated with foul smells. According to this theory, known as the miasma theory, anything that smelled rotten or unpleasant was dangerous, and exposure to such air could lead to illness. While this idea was based on observation, since disease often appeared in dirty and smelly environments, it confused correlation with causation, leading people to focus on the smell itself rather than the true source of infection. From this misunderstanding came another belief, one that had a lasting impact on European hygiene. People began to think that water, especially warm water, could open the pores of the body, making it easier for disease to enter. As a result, bathing was no longer seen as a way to stay healthy, but as a potential risk. Doctors at the time even advised against frequent bathing, reinforcing this idea, and over time, it became widely accepted across society. Instead of washing with water, people relied on alternative methods, such as wiping the body with cloth and changing garments when possible, but most importantly, they used strong perfumes to mask body odor. This approach extended beyond the body to other aspects of daily life. Hair, for example, was rarely washed, leading to the buildup of dirt, oil, and parasites such as lice. The discomfort caused by this led many people to shave their natural hair and wear wigs instead, which could be maintained separately and, at least in theory, kept more presentable. Over time, these wigs became symbols of status and authority, particularly among the upper classes, and eventually became part of formal traditions that still exist today. Similarly, cosmetics were used not only for aesthetic purposes, but also to conceal skin conditions, blemishes, and the effects of poor hygiene, even though some of these products contained harmful substances that could damage the skin further. Meanwhile, conditions outside the home were often even worse. In cities, waste was commonly disposed of by throwing it out of windows into the streets below, sometimes with a warning, but often without one. This meant that people walking through the streets were at constant risk of being hit by falling waste, and when combined with rain, which turned the streets into thick, contaminated mud, the environment became both unpleasant and dangerous. In response to these conditions, people adapted in practical ways. Shoes with elevated heels helped keep feet above the filth on the ground. Cloaks protected clothing from splashes, and certain social behaviors, which later became associated with politeness or refinement, may have originated as ways to navigate these hazardous environments more safely. By the 19th century, however, the situation had reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. Rapid urbanization and population growth had made cities even more crowded and unsanitary, leading to repeated outbreaks of disease. One of the most notable events was the Great Stink of London in 1858, when the smell from the polluted River Thames became so overwhelming that it disrupted government activity and forced authorities to take action. This led to the construction of modern sewer systems designed to carry waste away from populated areas, significantly improving sanitation. Around the same time, scientific advancements, particularly the development of germ theory, provided a new understanding of disease, showing that illness was caused not by bad air, but by microorganisms. With this new knowledge, attitudes toward cleanliness began to change. Bathing was no longer seen as dangerous, but as essential, and over time, regular hygiene practices returned. So what does this tell us? It reminds us that what appears refined on the surface often has a very different reality beneath it. The elegance of places like Versailles was real, but it existed alongside conditions that were far less pleasant than we might imagine. It also shows how powerful beliefs, even incorrect ones, can shape behavior for generations, influencing how entire societies live and think. And perhaps most importantly, it helps us appreciate something we often take for granted. The simple act of turning on a shower and having access to clean water is the result of centuries of change, innovation, and understanding. History has a way of revealing these contrasts, showing us that progress is not always straightforward, and that the world we live in today is built on lessons learned, sometimes the hard way.